still works after last night. So, okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's meeting of Children's Services Education and Skills Committee, Thursday, the 2nd of October. Firstly, our fire procedures at the County Chamber. In case of an emergency, there are no planned fire drills during this meeting. If you hear the fire alarm sound, please treat it as a real emergency and evacuate the building via the nearest safe escape route. The nearest escape route is via the stairs to your left as you leave the council chamber or the public gallery. Exit via the door at the back of the building. Walk across the inner car park to the evacuation point, which is the pavement opposite the police station. The lifts can't be used in the event of an emergency. Please do not re-enter the building to a safe advice to do so by a member of staff. So, firstly on tonight's meeting, apologies and substitutions. Councillor Churchman has apologised. Councillor Blake is substituting. Thank you, Councillor Blake. Councillor Love did indicate he wouldn't be able to make this evening. I did ask him to send a substitute. I've not had a response to that email since Saturday, so I assume that Councillor Love has emailed and can't find a replacement. Okay, item number 2, the minutes of the meeting on the 14th of August, which you've all had in your packs. Are there any comments on the meeting and minutes of the meeting of the 14th of August? Okay, in that case, can I have a proposer for the minutes, please? Councillor Hendrick, a seconder for the minutes? Councillor Fuller, all those in favour of the minutes?
Yeah, just to note, I wasn't present at them.
You can still, my impression was if you weren't at the meeting, but you understand what they're saying is the record I've been meeting, you can either abstain or, yeah. Okay, so that's all in favour. I'll just sign those off. Yes, Councillor.
Chairman, I have a long-standing meeting at 7 o'clock this evening, so I'm going to have to leave quite early. So apologies for that. It's not really my habit to leave early from meetings, but you know, with the committees being set up and other meetings being set up as well, it's very difficult to sort of like spread yourself thinly enough to be able to attend all these meetings. So I do have another meeting to get to that starts at 7 o'clock, so I'll be leaving here probably just before 6.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll see if I can get through the agenda. I want to get the school place planning bit at least done. So if necessary, we can reverse the agenda if necessary. We'll see if we get through the first bits. Thank you. Okay. Item 3, declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of interest in councillors not already declared on the official council website that you wish to declare at this stage? So, would you turn your microphone off? Yeah. Councillor Lilly.
I just want to say, because I know in the report the voluntary sector is mentioned. I am now the co-chair of the Isle of Wight Voluntary Sector Forum. And I was only elected this week, so I haven't had time to update my.
We'll note that in the minutes accordingly. Thank you very much. Okay. Item 4, public question time. I'm a little bit surprised actually. We've had no written questions, which does surprise me with what's on the agenda this evening. And you're entitled to ask the question from the gallery if you wish. If you have a question, you're more than entitled to answer it, or you can just okay. Do you want to stand up and use a microphone so people? Yeah, if you just touch the right-hand button on your microphone, yeah, should go red and then. Thank you for coming tonight, and I would love you to send me that questionnaire because, yeah, it'd be quite interesting. So if you could email me that questionnaire, I'll certainly put it in for you, no problem. Thank you. And thanks for coming this evening. If no more public questions, we'll move on to item 5, members' questions. There hasn't been any members' questions. So I will ask myself a question. As you know, one of the actions from the last meeting was for me to write to the Integrated Care Board, which do you all look at the communication group that I've set up for us all and see all the attachments I sent? So you've seen the letter I sent and had a couple of comments from Councillor Andre how good it was. So I sent the letter to the Integrated Care Board. What do you think of their response? You all read their response? I got it. I got it on the 20th. The response I got on the 26th of September from the Integrated Care Board. They promised me a response before this meeting, and I did get a response. Has anyone actually read the response that was sent? Thoughts?
Well, my first thoughts are that if you put into context, we have, as an island, we have a high number of young people in the health arena, right? Particularly around mental health. And I think that the answer needs to, I think they need to, whether it comes to this committee or you do it through you, Chair, but I think the letter needs to be explained in more detail, because I think when you actually look at particular cases, what you don't get in the answer is what's really happening to individual children and young people within this. And I think it would be interesting to give the response to Health Watch to actually, because they are actually dealing with cases, real people, and also I think to circulate it to some of our officers that are actually dealing with the cases, to actually get their reaction, right, to that response, because I think human beings don't fit nicely into a paragraph coming back from them. And I think that we still have a high number of young people ending up into health services that are not actually getting a service, right? I think we need to say that. It would be perhaps good if we work in partnership with adult social care and health, right? Because they, I mean, they did organise a meeting that I went to, and I think Councillor Fuller did here. Ashley was involved in with them about mental health, particularly on young people, which was actually quite a productive meeting. But one of the things that came out of that meeting was particularly Joe Dare was talking from the trust. It seemed that the trust had a better idea what was going on than actually CAMS did. And actually the answers that were coming from CAMS weren't actually terribly satisfactory at that particular meeting. And there were some questions and that. So I think we do need to reply, I think, to that letter, but I think it needs to get, involve others that are actually more on the front line of this. It'd be interesting to say what Ashley feels about that.
So officers have seen the letter and I've shared it. I've had conversations around content that I'll give my opinion on in a minute. Councillor Andre, your opinion on the letter, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have to admit, I was a bit disappointed with their response. I think it was quite, I would say, a corporate response. And they seemed quite keen to point out the successes, but when they actually covered the points of things that aren't going so well, I would have liked to have seen some statistics throughout and some evidence. It definitely seems to be lacking in evidence. For example, one of the things I know, because I sit on the adoption panel, is that for some time now, we have not had, we had a wonderful medical advisor who actually retired, and we've really struggled. And I know that that is one of the serious failings. It's mentioned in there, but it's been ongoing for quite some time. And it's like, well, we're still looking for a permanent solution. I would have liked to have seen some statistics in there to actually back up what they're saying. So I think Councillor Lilly mentioned Health Watch, and I always look at the Health Watch intelligence reports that come through, because they're a very, very good source of data. And also the other point I'd like to make about the letter, I thought it didn't, for me, I would like to see much more patient-led services. And that letter for me came across, it wasn't actually patient-led, it was system-led. And I think there needs to be more focus on individuals. And I think that's perhaps something that we can actually help with and work with. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any more comments from those that have read it? I appreciate it only came through this week, but it's definitely worth a read. My own view, when you send a half-page letter with 5 specific asks on it, and you get a 3-page letter back, it's because it's justification of what they're doing generically, as opposed, we asked 5 specific questions on the letter, and I don't think they've actually been answered. I mean, there are some, the bits about the NHS, college, sorry, the council, are working closely together. I think that's probably true. I think there is a much closer working relationship than perhaps there has been in the past, and that's, that's good. But when you look at the specifics, you mentioned CAMS, Councillor Lilly, you're right, but their comment on CAMS isn't specific to the island. Same on mental health. The waiting lists are still too long. They might be making progress, but it's still not acceptable. Their waiting times, speech and language waiting times also, they're far too long. There are comments around Bernardo's, fair enough, and comments around, the safeguarding hub, which is obviously very effective. But then you go on to some of their wider things, like speech and language is an issue, and I'll perhaps let Ashley touch on that in a second. And I'm sure Steph will touch on the special school nursing, because I think that's a bit of a smoke screen they've put up there as well. So I think there is, as you mentioned about going back, I'm sure Kayla have comments as well. I think there is scope for us to go back and challenge some more specifics on this. If the committee are happy, will the officers come into the conversation? But I think there's room to go back and ask for the questions that we asked originally to be properly answered. So I'll let officers pick up on some of those comments first, and we'll go from there. Ashley, do you want to kick off? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. If I talk overall about the letter, and then if other colleagues want to talk about specific areas of service. So I'd start by saying I absolutely agree with what they say at the beginning of the letter about the strong working relationships that we have on the island. I think a lot of our health colleagues are working incredibly hard, and we regularly meet. A lot of them come and sit in our office here because we are one island team, and we work together to support the children and families on the island. In fact, only about an hour and a half ago, many of us were in a meeting with colleagues from the Integrated Care Board and from the Trust. So I absolutely recognise that strong working relationship. It's true, and I think we've made a lot of progress with that over recent months. I think it's also true, there's a number of references in the letter to recruitment challenges. I think there are challenges, particularly for very specialist colleagues on the island, and when people retire, there aren't necessarily people available with that skill set or that capacity to step into these roles. So they acknowledge that, and they say that they are continuing to work on it, which is true. And I think there's other reference. So, for example, speech and language therapy in the letter to the fact that there are changes afoot. Things are taking longer than they perhaps would like, but it's work in progress. And there's a number of comments around that. I guess for me, the other thing is it's about capacity in the system. So where organisations have statutory duties, it's important that they understand the needs of the population so that they can have enough capacity to meet those needs and deliver their statutory duties. And if we say, for example, speech and language therapy, and the increase in the numbers of children who need speech and language therapy, or we link it to, for example, the increase in the numbers of education and healthcare plans, which have been going up for some years by about 10% a year, which is in line with what's been happening nationally, we have two choices. We either find a model of delivery which is so much more efficient that we don't need to increase capacity by 10% a year, or we need to increase capacity by 10% a year. And those are some of the discussions which are ongoing, for example, around speech and language therapy, where, yes, there has been a review about the needs of children, and there's been consideration of the current model. And we continue to talk with Integrated Care Board about whether that capacity is sufficient to meet that increasing need. So I would think we would welcome, an ongoing dialogue between the Integrated Care Board and the committee. So if the committee would like to write back, I think that would be helpful. I don't know if other colleagues want to talk about either the special school nursing point or anything about children's social care.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Well, that comment they put there about special school nursing sort of doesn't actually say anything. That that was a bit the right hand one.
So, as my experience as head teacher of the secondary special school in the island, it is about recruitment and retention. It's been really challenging, and there are systems in place to support us, but they're things like a duty line, phone calls, that sort of thing. And when we've got young people experience complex medical situations, we have to act on that there and then. Obviously, we call 999. It's not ideal, but we are working towards a solution. So we have some new nurses starting after October half term. We work with the team to try and improve the service in the schools, but it's challenging. But recruitment and retention is a major issue.
I should say thank you. Welcome to your first meeting. And to Abby as well. Thank you for coming along this evening. Much appreciated. But I think, members, any questions for officers on what you've just heard? Absolutely, yeah.
I've got one question. It's sort of an ongoing thing, particularly to do with mental health. Obviously, the change of the trust is Hampshire-wide now. And one of the sort of anomalies is this 0 to 25 or 0 to 18, i.e. when you finish as a child, you go into adult services, and you've got different things across the region. So for instance, in Portsmouth, they go 0 to 25, whereas on the island, we go 0 to 18. And often, if people are experiencing different levels of mental health issues, their maturity is later. So actually, to move into adult services are not appropriate. And the new trust promise, I can remember them coming to an adult scrutiny, health scrutiny committee some time ago, saying that they were going to resolve this nationally. Straightforward. If you go to Birmingham, it's 0 to 25, but it causes us a problem. Being a small place, a 18-year-old going into 7 acres is not appropriate, right? And it seems to have got swept under the carpet. So if we're going to write back to them, I think they need to get an answer on this, on the transition from particularly around mental health to adult services.
Interestingly enough, I agree with you. Actually, I had a meeting yesterday with Kate Harvey, our new public health director. I was very impressed actually. I thought she's really knows what she's doing. And one of the things we talked about yesterday, I've shared this letter with her. One thing we talked about yesterday was the transition from adult to, it's a person. It's not about who looks after them. It's a person being dealt with by the Isle of Wight Council. And but one of her, she's got many aims, many goals. And I said, one of her goals is to make sure that there is no interruption in that transition. And I know she's working with Ashley and Kay already and working with Laura on the adult social care team. So I'm confident that that transition issue, if there is one, won't be there because it can't be there. So I think, if you ever talk to Kate, she's focused on that transition. So as long as the committee are happy, I will work with Kay and Ashley and whoever else wants to get involved in drafting up a response to it. I just think they haven't answered our questions either. Points we raised are fine. We asked them specific questions in the letter. They haven't answered them specifically enough for us. And now we started a dialogue with them. We may as well keep it going because I know officers have got a relationship with the ICB that they're fostering, that's developing. I haven't. So I can challenge them on things because I'm not in a relationship with them. I'm just holding to account for what they're doing for the island. So I think if some members are happy with that, I'll respond and I'll copy you into response when we drafted it. Is that all right with officers to help me do that? Thank you. We'll move on, I think.
Chairman, I just
Yeah,
I just wanted to ask a quick question.
push again.
Knowing the public health aspect of adult services, the Adult Services Committee, and how they look at it, is there some scope in inviting them to a joint committee meeting with adult services so we can have a face-to-face with them? I think we might be able to get much more from face-to-face than just sending emails and responses from them and them telling us what they want us to hear. I think it would be really useful to get them on board and be able to maybe not scrutinise them, but ask those relevant questions. And it isn't just us; it's also public health and the other committee as well that we should be working closely with. I'd like to see some kind of partnership working there as we've done before.
I'll get corrected if I say this wrongly, but I would do this via Adult Social Care Committee because they have a scrutiny function that we don't. So we can invite someone to talk to us. We don't have the right under the Constitution to scrutinise anybody. Adult Social Care Committee do have the right to scrutinise. So if we did it through Claire Mosdale's committee, we went as well. We can then scrutinise as much as we like. So you're right. But I think the way we do it, I'm seeing nods from good. That's good. Councillor Andre, sorry.
Just to add to that, Chair, just to reassure, I sit on both committees, and recently 3 members of the Adult Social Care Committee accepted an invitation to visit the centre in Pyle Street. And they actually gave us a very good update, and they're sending the slides through. So what might be helpful and obviously there is the mental health and CAMS part of that. So if it's helpful, I could share the slides with you, Chair. So at least there is that connection, but I do accept. But just to reassure you, it is something that we are taking up under the statutory committee. Thank you.
Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a quick look through the letter. Didn't read it all, but it does say on there about attending the next Children's Services meeting at the end and to have a dedicated agenda item. Is that possible then, or would we not allowed to do that?
We can invite them to our meeting. They can come and speak at our meeting, and they will probably come and justify exactly what they've done in the letter to us. But I'm looking at Simon again now. We don't have the statutory right in the Constitution to grill them that adult social care do. So if we can invite them to come and talk to us, but I'm guessing looking at the way they responded by letter, you'll get the same type of generic, although we can question them, we can't actually scrutinise them. There's a difference. So yes, we can invite them, and in the letter we will invite them in the response letter that we draft, but we have more rights to talk to them directly, if you like, and challenge them more if it was done by. I'll talk to Councillor Mosdale, but we'll do it one way or the other.
So
definitely.
we're saying it's better that way than doing
Well,
it.
I think
We all have both.
yeah, through their committee we have more right to scrutinise as opposed to listen to them tell us how good they are,
Mm.
which we don't need to know that, do we?
Chair, you just,
Councillor Blake, sorry.
you can give them a very specific brief to give a report on. Obviously, then you can't scrutinise on that. Well, depending on timings, Councillor Christensen's proposal of both might. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I say. Yeah.
When we draft our response, we will invite them to a future meeting for the specific agenda and what we want them to actually answer, not just go down a generic. We can do that, can't we? Yeah. Yes, we can. We will. In the letter I send back, there'll be an element of inviting them in to talk to us. Final comment, Councillor Lilly, before we move
Yeah,
on?
I was just going to say, it was done recently over young people and mental health. And we were invited as a committee to all go to that meeting. I did, Councillor Fuller did, I think Councillor Andre had sort of both. And actually that was a very effective meeting and we had all the players there. And I know Ashley was involved in that, asked questions as well. And I actually thought it was a very productive meeting.
Yeah.
With that.
That's Christian, yeah.
Following that obviously in this forum, we couldn't do that. Can we have like a Teams meeting where we can ask more questions informally? Is that possible as a committee?
Yes, but I would sooner do it formally. I'd like them to be talking about the public because it's the public that, yeah.
I
should
get the
hear-
value of
we
both
can,
options, I
we can
think, as well.
any informal we want, we can have. We're going to have an informal in a few weeks' time, as you know, but we can have, I'd sooner they did it in front of the public gaze.
Yeah, which I always think.
But
is
we will
more
arrange
useful. But
what you
sometimes
want
you
to
get
happen.
different answers informally and then sometimes more useful answers. So perhaps.
I think
should
informal
investigate.
chat with the ICB is probably, we need formal chats with the ICB now. I think the informal bit hasn't delivered what we want. I
Okay.
think we need to have the formal.
No,
But
think
yeah, we
that's
will
maybe
get,
what we need to just to
we will
discuss
get it
that.
done. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on. What I'm going to do, Councillor Fuller has said he's got to leave at a certain time. I'm going to change the order of the menu. My stomach's rumbling, I beg your pardon. I'm going to change the order. I'm going to move the performance update down to either 0.8 or 0.9 because committee member development that's snuck in on the agenda without me seeing it before, we need to cover off because it's really important that we do that as well. So I'm going to move section 7 up to the next one and then put the performance update after the member development plan, if that's okay. But if Councillor is going to stay to the end of the meeting, well, no, I'm going to move item 7 up the agenda now because I'm allowed to do that apparently. So we'll kick off with 7A, which is our school and post-16 policy plan. I know that Jade has done most of the work for this, but Jade is now on maternity leave and Abby's going to here to present or answer questions. So Abby, we won't, we're not going to eat you alive, so don't worry. And say thank you for coming this evening to present this paper. And I always assume that members are better with papers.
So the policy was last reviewed and consulted on in January 24. We've worked with it for a year now, and we're seeking permission to consult on some amendments to wordings and also to increase the cost for spare seats on school buses and also the cost of post-16 transport parental contribution. That is proposal 10 in the paper. I think it's page 24, is the increase of parental contributions for spare seat. And there's no wording amendments for post-16 transport policy. It is just the permission to consult on the increase in cost. Hopefully that's clear.
Thank you. I've read I thought our homeschool transport policy it's a key area because obviously we spend a lot of money and a lot of overspend on this area. So the policy I thought was it hasn't been updated for a while. So a lot of work's gone into. So thank you to the whole team who put a lot of work into this because it's a really detailed. And if you read the amendments to the policy, it just tightens up on areas that perhaps needed tightening up on. I thought the policy was tight to start with, but when we see the amendments going into the policy, I think it's really so. Thank you for doing such a I don't know how much involvement you had in the policy writing it, but it's a really good one. So, members, questions? Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. I note that the recommendation is actually to approve proceeding with a public consultation. And we know through past experience that this is going to be another potentially difficult consultation, I think, to run. But it's against a backdrop of needing to balance our budget. I mean, as a council, we are under extreme financial pressures. I do note that it is actually in line with the new statutory guidance published by the DFE in January 24. So I think that needs to be, and it will be clear in the consultation that we are adhering to statutory guidance, but it's one of those situations, I think, where we are almost between a rock and a hard place. So I think this is going to be a difficult one, but I think the work that's been done and I think the proposals that are being put forward are the best possible way that we can go. Thank you.
Well, that'd be answered. I think the key thing, what we're talking about here is changes to the policy. We're not talking about the overspend or the money necessarily. This is changes to the wording of the policy. I think the overspend and the additional costs and other work on this on the homeschools transport is almost like a separate issue. This is bringing our policy very much where it needs to be in line with statutory guidance. Yeah, of course that will affect, the budget at the same time, but this isn't about how we're going to save money on homeschools transport. That's a separate conversation. This is about, policy structure. Councillor Blake.
Chair, thank you. I have a question around the mileage allowance. Is that 45p a mile? Is that a statutory requirement, or is that something that a figure we've come up to ourselves?
That's a HMRC rate, so it's in line with HMRC.
Just to comment, obviously, that at 150 a litre, assuming a car does only 20 miles to the gallon, which is quite low, that would come out at 34p. It's quite a lot, but that's why I wonder if we had any chance to influence that. Thank you.
So did you want to answer Councillor Andre's question at the same time around, is this bringing this in line with statutory, and that's the main reason for an update in the policy?
Yeah, so the policy was updated in 2024, and that was after around 10 years of not being updated completely. So we brought that in line last year with the guidance, but with working with it for a year, we've decided that there's elements that haven't actually been included that do need tightening up, making a bit clearer for parents so they know what they are entitled to.
Yeah, you may, of course you can.
Thank you for that. I think the important thing here, which you've just alluded to, is that everybody has clarity. I think that's the really important thing that we achieve. The outcome out of this is that we're absolutely clear that this is the policy and this is what we're setting. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Councillor Christian, just before Councillor Fuller.
I thought I'd just say, so basically we've been offering more than perhaps statutorily that you had to. So some people will be used to getting a certain service and then they won't when this is updated, and that's what we're going to have to deal with. Just making sure we're clear on that, really, and that publicly is that what's going to be out there. Thank you.
So in terms of wording, it isn't anything that we don't already provide it. We're just clarifying in line with statutory guidance that it isn't something we provide, but we don't provide it. All of the things that we are changing, we don't currently provide.
When I read it, I saw it. I didn't see anyone was going to lose out. I thought it was more tightening up on the wording of.
It's more of a wording change than anything else.
Thank you. That's why I just wanted to double check.
Yeah.
That's useful to know.
Councillor Fuller.
Thank you. I'm quite happy to support the report. It is for consultation. Anything that comes back will be can be digested by us once we go out to consultation. But I think it's an important consultation, and I think we should just move forward and get that consultation supported.
I'll allow Councillor Hendry to have his comment. Councillor Hendry.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pretty much adding what Councillor Fuller said. The policy makes sense. It's just tightening things up, removing some of the ambiguity. I can't say the word.
Ambiguity.
Thank you. It just makes sense. It's going out to consultation. It will come back to us. I would probably we can vote on it.
Yeah, Abby, do you want to have final comment?
Yeah, it will come back in January once the consultation is closed. We'll do another report and it will come back in January for decision.
So has the wording of the consultation and the timing of the consultation has now been signed off, and it is January? You know, is it feasible for you to analyse the consultation for January?
Yeah, I think if agreed tonight that we can consult, it's for the 6th, from the 6th of October. So from Monday, it will go live till the 28th of November, which gives us enough time to create the report and analyse the consultation feedback.
In that case, then, Councillor Fuller, I'll read the recommendation. The recommendation is that this committee approve proceeding with a public consultation on the proposed changes to school transport policy and post-16 transport statement for a further report setting out the findings of the consultation to be presented at a future committee meeting in January. Councillor Fuller has proposed that. Councillor Hendry second that recommendation. Can I also vote, please? All those in favour of recommendation? Thank you. Abby, thank you very much. We'll look forward to your further report in at our January meeting. Hopefully, if it's done by then, we can bring it back then. Thank you. Okay. Doing well for Councillor Fuller. Okay. Item 7B is obviously the school place planning options paper, which you've all had and time to digest and all its appendices. Obviously, this is something that this committee asked in June for an options paper to come forward, really going back to basics on the place planning process. But what we did agree as a committee was not talking about past events. This is now a very critical situation on the island, affecting all schools in a serious way, and standards as well as a result of that. So it's something that we agree that we needed as a committee to address. We can't just sit by and allow this to happen. So we're going to discuss it in a second, but you all need to be open-minded on what we set the aim that we want to address this problem. Let's address this in an open-minded way. It is critical, as I said now. I'm sure we've all read all the previous papers. We've got to go into this with no predetermined, no grandstanding, and certainly no politics being played. And this is about the young people on the Isle of Wight who deserve the best education we can give them. So let's not play politics with this one. This is about the children, staff, communities, and our officers and the time they spend putting papers together for us. We can do this if we do it the right way, do it together, we can achieve the right outcomes. I just want to first of all thank Naomi and the officers for putting this paper together. We asked them to go back to basics and produce a paper of all the options available to address this situation. And they've done that. They've done exactly what we asked them to do as a committee. Thanks again to Naomi, to Jade, to Sarah and to Di. They put on governors events. I attended one. I don't know if anyone else did. I attended one. And the appendix with it's all done on big flip chart presentations. Someone has spent a lot of time getting all the flip chart comments onto the appendix we've got. And governors were really engaged at those meetings. We asked them open questions. I didn't, but open questions were asked. Governors were honest in their feedback at the presentation. And we really did get good insight to what governors, think about what happens. So thank you again for doing all those workshops, and thanks. You've passed that on to Sarah and Di as well. Well, Di's left as well, and she Di's going as well, and Jade's gone. So just thank Sarah really. So since the last meeting, I'm good to see that Jeff Williams is still on board, isn't he? Yeah, Jeff's here. Rob's here because I invited Jeff and Rob from the diocese personally to tonight's meeting. They're both doing it virtually. Catherine also is online. Catherine told me she'd have a dodgy signal in the car, but if I need to talk to Catherine after this meeting, I will do. because I want the diocese very much to understand what we're doing regarding all of this. And I've had a good engagement with Jeff Williams already when I had a phone call to him, and head teachers too. I've spoken to a few head teachers about what's going to happen, and I think there's work we could do with head teachers as some sort of meeting between the committee and head teachers to understand their views. I think that's something we can look to offer head teachers, all head teachers, not just the executive, offer all head teachers a chance to meet with us so we can have probably it won't just be me talk, because it's not me. I'm only one ninth of a cabinet member. So I suppose that all the committee get the chance to talk to head teachers, get their views on things. And finally, I've written to the Regional Schools Commissioner, South East Regional Director, as she's now rightly called, because the one of the comments in the previous consultation was were all schools included? And obviously we've now got 4, soon to be 5 primary academies on the island. And obviously this problem's going to hit secondary schools in due course. In a couple of years' time, secondaries are going to see the impact of this rollout shortages in primary schools. So I sent a letter to the Regional Schools Regional Director. I sent the letter to Dame Kate Dethridge. I just sent you all the letter. I haven't yet shared with you the response. She has actually sent me a response, which I will read. So she said to me, "Thank you for your letter dated the 8th of September about surplus school places on the Isle of Wight. Financial and education implications of excess capacity are noted. I understand the challenges this presents for schools and the local authority. I appreciate your efforts to re-engage stakeholders, including head teachers, governors and the diocese, to ensure a more sustainable and equitable future for all schools on the island. In response to your query, the government recognises the need for an area-based approach to pupil place planning, just as it is important that academy trusts and where relevant dioceses support local authority in providing additional places where there are need, and it is equally important that support the removal of surplus places in a system where there is no forecast increase in the need for school places in the medium to long term. I appreciate you engaged academies and trusts on the island under the previous process, but I would recommend engaging directly with the relevant trusts in the new process to ensure their input is reflected in your options paper. My office will be happy to help facilitate such discussions to promote a coherent and suitable and sustainable approach. Please keep me informed of the outcomes of your committee meeting on the 2nd. I'll be happy to offer further support or clarification as your work progresses." So she was never going to come back and say, yes, you can do what you like with closed academies, but and I know that's probably what was agreed last time anyway, but we have the right under that, and she would help us to engage with academies to make sure they are included in this process, because that was one of the public concerns last time, that we didn't include academies and we'd narrowed the field down for school closures. I will send you all that letter. Only came through this week. That's Andre.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, that's the first time I've heard it. But am I right in thinking I heard an offer from the regional inspector to meet with us and representatives of the academies, or did I not hear that?
I think what she's offered is to facilitate, a conversation that needs. But we know the trusts anyway. We know who they are. We know who to talk to. So it's sort of like saying that if we don't know who they were, she would facilitate that. But as we know who they are, we can go and talk to these trusts. Do they wish to be part of the process? But that will come out more perhaps when we talk about the options paper in a second. But it was, at least unlike the ICB, she actually answered the question. And I know that Ashley has had always certainly correspondence with her, as has his team of at a regional level as well. So it's an issue that is being raised, and I have written to our MPs, as you saw. I've written to both our MPs twice. I'll write to our MPs again, because our MPs need to be involved in this as well at parliamentary level. So I'll keep pestering writing to our MPs as well. So that's what I've done since the last meeting to get to this paper. I've said enough now, so I'll let Naomi and Ashley run through the paper.
Thank you, Chair. So just to be clear, when we were formulating this paper, we did meet with head teacher and governing bodies. We had a number of workshops online and face to face. We felt that as they were the key stakeholders, it was really important to get their views if they've gone through the process previously. Notwithstanding that, you can see through the appendices the outcomes of those workshops. And as we all know, we have an issue on the island where we have a decreasing birth rate, and we also have a budgetary issue across our primary school system where our deficits are growing year on year. If we go through the options, and I'm assuming you've all read the papers, if I go through the key options and then obviously the recommendations that we're asking for committee tonight, on pages 79, we've under point 13, we've laid out the various options around reducing surplus places. So 13.1 is voluntary school closures. That's an LA-led process, and we've laid out the strengths and areas of concern for that. 13.2, voluntary amalgamation. That's LA-led, and there's the pros and cons for that option. 13.3, amalgamation, creating a new school. So that's closure by a different name. That's where you have two schools coming together, and the previous schools would be, it wouldn't exist anymore, and the strengths and areas of concern are there. 13.4 is diocesan-led closure, and that's where we'd work with the diocesan to work with closing one of their schools. 13.5 is mass closure, and this is island-wide or planning area focus. This would depend upon the appetite of the committee and obviously the whatever we're mandated to do. We have, as part of our suggestions, looked at the planning areas because obviously that come up in the previous process around the fact that they hadn't been addressed in some time. 13.6 is the annual school closure process where we would look at closing a school every year, and the strengths and areas of concern are laid out there. 13.7 is the reduction of planned admission numbers, and we have the strengths and areas of concern there. We have done a significant number of PAN reductions over the last few years. We feel that optimally that is something that we've exhausted, but obviously that's for you to decide. 13.8 is the support of small schools. Basically, that remains our status quo at the moment, where we take no action and work to support our small schools on the island. 13.9 is voluntary aided school self-closure. So governing bodies of voluntary aided schools can propose the closure of the school. It doesn't necessarily have to be LA-led. 13.10 is mutual consent closure with the DFE and academies, and that's where academies can put themselves forward for closure. 13.11, maintain schools become academies. That doesn't necessarily reduce the surplus places, but it is an option available to the system. 13.12 is the creation of all through schools, as we have at the Bay, which is a primary and secondary all through. And what we're asking the committee to consider tonight and make a decision on are the options. And they're laid out as A, the committee approves the period of engagement with stakeholders to establish a number of key things. One, key principles around the future structure of the school system on the Isle of Wight, what we want that to look like, the optimal sizes, our stance around rural schools and the size of schools there. Point 2 there is the options available to move to such a structure within an appropriate time frame. So once we've established what we would like our school system to look like, how would we move towards that? B is the committee approves the commencement of a consultation on the school place planning areas. So we review our school place planning areas, which we haven't done in over 10 years. And C is the committee approves the review of the school place planning strategy, which we brought to the previous cabinet last year. And then D is to reject all or none of the proposals set out above. At that point, I'll pause for any questions.
I think committee firstly will agree that, you know, this paper does what it asked to do, is pulled out all the available options. There's 12 potential options to solve this problem. You know, I know option D is to reject all the proposals. We've already, as a committee, said that we can't do that. We've already said we need to, you know, address this issue. And so the recommendation on the front page of the paper does not include to reject all proposals. We've already made that decision back in June. We reaffirmed it earlier this evening. So the paper does bring it back to basics. So what we're looking for now, place planning areas haven't been reviewed. That was commented on the last consultation. This is about, do we wish to proceed with a big consultation now for a paper to come back probably in March, timing wise, with the recommendations that we need to consider. Still not talking about individual schools, talking about the system we're putting in place, as opposed to, and naming any schools in the process. Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. Just to start off with, we've heard tonight about the focus on the place planning areas. Now, it's my understanding that as a local authority, it is within our remit to redefine the areas, but I think it has to be still agreed by the DFE. But I think we need to be careful, because what we are looking at here and the school place planning strategy is a strategy for the whole island. So I don't personally, having lived through this, I don't think it's terribly helpful to focus too much on the areas, because that all comes out within the evidence and the data anyway. It's we really, what we're looking at is a holistic approach. So I think that's my initial comment. Is I'm not saying we shouldn't redefine the school place areas, but I don't think we should become too focused on it, because as we I know, don't want to really refer back, but we do know, even from current statistics, that parents do choose schools that are not necessarily, some do choose their local school, but a lot don't. So I think we do need to look at this holistically. Thank you.
Naomi, do you want to?
We, absolutely want to do an island-wide strategy. The reason for place planning areas is that, it's DFE defined, and we know that in certain areas of the island, there is a more pronounced problem than in others. So it would be prudent to have those place planning areas so that we can focus in on areas where there is a more of an issue with the surplus places rather than other areas, which I think for head teachers that are having to live this would be better for their mental health and well-being if they know that we're focusing on certain areas, if that's the mandate that you provide and give us.
I think it might be, if you're doing a big consultation, to consult on to add on to that, the question around the place planning areas, and really look at that as well at the same time, seems to make sense if we're doing such a big consultation rather than separate. Probably might get more responses. But yeah, I take your point. Do you, Trevor, your second question?
Sorry, just to follow up on that, I think in terms of the consultation, what would be really helpful is after each question to actually have a free form box for comments, because we want to make this as accessible as possible. And with the best will in the world, sometimes people don't interpret the questions to give us the answers that we need. So I think to actually have like a free form box after each question would be quite helpful and would make the consultation carry more weight. Thank you.
Councillor Lilly, next.
Thank you. First, can I thank you for the work that you've done, and the workshops. I actually found those extremely interesting, because I think just looking through them, there's some very practical suggestions that are actually coming from the ground. And I think when you come to your report, you'll feed into some of those. And I think using the word lessons learned, there was a lot of lessons learned by the process, and some very positive things that came out of that process. I think one of the things slightly different from Councillor Andre on the school place planning areas, for me there was some anomalies where you actually had children going to a school that basically were being taken to that school away from the area that they actually lived, but those and few children necessarily coming from the area that the school was placed in, but that was then classed as a rural school, and didn't actually take in. That particularly, I know from experience around Ryde, was a particular issue with some of the schools surrounding. So I think we do need to look at some of those anomalies that did come up through that period. You do have this strange Ryde rural in the place planning area and side. So I think we do need to have a look at it and look at the practice. I think one of the things you really learn is where children were travelling from. There was an incredible matrix that hadn't been done before that you did through the process. So you actually know where the children came from. And I think there's some questions asked. Why were they travelling to that school? Why weren't they actually walking to their nearest school, which was a side? So I think that will come out in the consultation within that. I think the other particular lessons, and I can see it in some of the comments, is one of the things came up was that a lot of our schools are not just schools. They're actually community centres or community hubs, and they will affect. And I know it's not for here to us to necessarily refer to the school adjudicator report on one school, but there was this comment in that about the importance that we need to take on, that if you take a school out of a particular area, what do you replace the community economic importance of that particular school? And I think that to me was the particular thing that was actually missing in the process before, is we need to think about that, because at the end of the day, the child goes home to a community, and that community is a functioning of that family. And I think it was a particular relevance to the school in my area, being that it was a very deprived area inside. And the other particular point, and again it comes out, it's definitely there in the different comments, about children who are linked to other children's services. And it was very interesting when I went to the care experience, can't remember the award ceremony, and one of the awards you gave was a young man who actually had been an activist fighting the actual closure of his school, and wonderfully you gave him an award actually to recognise his sort of public speaking and his campaigning in that, and talking to that foster family and that child at that event. It was very clear that the school really catered for their needs. And when you talk to the social workers and things and that, it would have been a traumatic effect of actually moving that child. And I think we got so much good data to learn from that experience, to make sure the word holistic is we actually do get this holistically correctly. Thank you.
Naomi.
Just to answer some of your points there, in terms of rural schools, we don't define those. That's from the DfE. So the DfE have a rural schools list, which is published, and they have different categorisation of rural schools. So I'd signpost to that. In terms of where people live, you're absolutely right. We were really quite, surprised about the dot maps that we created. There's only one school on the island which draws from its local area. We also have to consider things like safe walking routes to schools and other transportation issues there. We can't, all the time we have surplus places, parents have the right and the choice to move their children to other schools. No one wants to close a school. Closing the school is a loss of a community asset. However, we have got a real issue on the island, And, you know, our head teachers, our governors, most people understand that, you know, all the time we have a falling birth rate and surplus places, our school system is not operating at its optimal best. And we have to do something different. That doesn't necessarily mean closures. We put into the paper around amalgamation, but the only way we're going to solve this is if we work together. Because what happens is when you name a school or when you go down a route, people become divided, and that doesn't help children. And ultimately, we've got to do what's best for children on this island.
If I say, I think I'm quite happy to allow comments like lessons learned, because I think that lessons have been learned. But I don't want the conversation straying into last schools named and stuff. I think because it is about the young people. I think you're right. Parental choice is still the overriding factor on the island, and with surplus bases, parental choice is vast because there are lots of schools with. And I'm not going to. We could spend the next hour picking holes in the last consultation that the Alliance Green Party administration did, but we're not there to do that. We're here to put and I think the options on the table are exactly going back to basics. The fact that we've got the diocese both on board, several head teachers are now on board with the conversation. The fact that we are engaging with the regional schools regional director of education. You know, we're going to talking to everyone we need to talk to, including the public, staff, communities, to make sure whatever we do next is right, taking all the lessons learned from the previous conversation. You're absolutely spot on. So, Councillor Blake, sorry, you want to come back, Michael? Yeah?
I just want to come back. You mentioned the diocese, so they're here.
Yeah.
It would be very useful for me, and I'm sure committee members, to actually get the view directly of the director of the diocese on this paper. I'd like to hear that. Thank you.
Thanks. Is my microphone on?
Okay, I'm allowed to do that. So, Jeff, good evening.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Jeff. Carry on.
Great, thank you. So before I come to answer the question that's just been tabled, a couple of reflections from me, because it is important with regard to where we go next. I don't want to rehearse everything from last year, but I do want to remind people that throughout the year, I repeatedly asked councillors and officers to listen, because I had categorically found that the process was wrong. I was ignored. We did not want to take it to the Office of the Schools Adjudicator, but you'll have all seen the report. Massive report, hugely critical of the process. And I had pointed out throughout various things that are in this paper, things like paying attention to the DFE documents on school closures,
Jeff,
paying
Jeff,
attention.
Jeff, sorry. No. Can I just ask you, can you talk about this current pack? I'm sorry to cut you off, Jeff. I've shared your comments that you and I had. Can I ask just your comments specifically on, the current paper? This is a fresh process. I want to start it with all of us on board with it. Could I just ask specifically, I'll hear your comments on the current paper, please.
Yeah, providing the introductory comments about how the process is going to run is kept to. We're glad, and we've worked with you before on closing schools prior to the current administration, so we'll work with you. The immediate comment I've got is whether or not proposing a whole raft of schools at the same time, like the last time, is the best way forward. That's a personal view, and I don't think that would be helpful, frankly. The other thing that is not clear in the paper, and I think I'm not speaking on behalf of the Catholic diocese, but they'll have a similar view, where amalgamation is mentioned. Amalgamation is a euphemism for closure. So some schools would close, and those children would go to a school that remains open. Now, that operates differently for Church of England schools, because if we were saying to a Church of England school, we want you to amalgamate with school X, which is not a church school, that then throws into question the coverage of church schools on the island, because what you'd be doing through a backdoor method is closing a Church of England school and not having appropriate provision for those schools. So that's the only comment I'd prepare to make, really, until I see more detail.
Jeff, that is so helpful, and thank you for your comments. That's really appreciated. So we know, your views on where we are, and we'll keep you informed and involved every stage of the process that we can.
Thank you.
Catherine, I don't know whether you're driving and able to speak or not. Hello, Catherine.
Yeah, hello. I've pulled over so that I can join in. Apologies, I've had to be doing the meeting in the car. In terms of the Catholic Diocese is fully supportive of the need for this to happen. We fully acknowledge the impact of it not happening that's had on schools across the island going forward. I think my only observations are I would want to be crystal clear on what the criteria that will be used so that people really know whether it applies to them or not, rather than things coming as a bit of a surprise. And also where the current proposals sit in any long-term plans. So I think there was uncertainty, if you like, this time as to whether that was it for school closures, whether there were further closures to come, and I'd want to see the mapping out of the proposals for education over a sustainable period of time.
And Catherine, thank you for your comments, and thank you for pulling over. I know you said you may be able to go online this evening where you are, so thank you very much. And we can always talk further if we need to. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chair. Just whilst that comments were made about criteria, I just want to pick up on that a second, because that is something that's come out time and time again. It comes up in the consultation notes, and it comes from all the conversations I've had with teachers across the schools. Criteria needs to be at the forefront of this. So I think that's the best way of getting schools on board. To carry on from Councillor Andre's point about a holistic view on the island, I entirely agree. I think what we've got to also take into account is that because people aren't sending to the schools that we necessarily think they might be sending them to, we need to ask, where would you send them if they couldn't send to where they are now? Because we might find that, for instance, I was sent to a school that was near to where my grandparents were, so they could pick me up at 2:30. That, where would my parents have sent me elsewhere might not be to the one that we think they're going to be sending me to. It might be somewhere, it might be nearer to where they work. So I think we need to ask the question, if we can possible, if you couldn't send your child to the school now, where would you send them to? And that might even result in a school that's currently undersupplied, totting up its numbers. So I think if we're going to do this holistically, we can't, and particularly we are going to need to do this on a large scale. We can't do this. We're beyond that now. The time for doing it piecemeal was 4 or 5 years ago. We're beyond that. We're heading into a dire situation. And actually, if you take a big cut now, you are likely to stop further closures down the line, totaling more than what we could do now, just because of the ongoing financial situation. So if we're going to do this, let's do it right and preempt what's going to happen next, because what we don't want to do is suffer ill effects because we haven't thought what's happening next. Also picking up on Naomi's point about I totally get that these rural schools, sort of the subdivisions of a rural school are set by DfE. I just query why Godsill's a rural village, but Knighton is a rural town and fringe. I wouldn't have said that Knighton was any different to Godsill. Does that affect them in any way at all?
It's just the different considerations under the rural schools guidance that the DfE set. We don't actually have anything to do with how they're categorised. That is from the DfE.
So it doesn't have any material effect on them, on their designation, or any funding, anything like that at all?
Nothing to do with the funding or anything like that. But in terms of when we're looking at school closures, obviously we have to take rural status into consideration. So then we'd have to do, a lot more work around that and the impact of that closure on the rural community. Can I just point out, answer your questions if that's okay as well, or make a comment on them? Both the points are really valid around criteria and, you know, where would you send your children to school if you didn't have that school down the road? And obviously we would want that to form part of a consultation. Should you mandate us to do that? Because they're the sort of questions that we need to ask the public at large.
Also, one of the questions asked at the governors' workshops was criteria and metrics. And it was quite a lively session, that one, on, you know, from governors. And a lot of it was around communication and no understanding. And, you know, but so officers are really thinking about, you know, how a metrics could look. It can't be a scoring metrics or anything like that, but what criteria, as you said earlier, is key, communication. Naomi.
And just to say as well, through the workshops around the criteria, there was no common consensus. And I think we would struggle to find common consensus when it comes to such an emotive topic. So I think what we need to do is if we do go out to a consultation, it is around what would you like that criteria to be? And then you need to decide whether you want that to be unanimous in terms of, you know, do you want everyone to, you're not going to get that? Or do you want it to be, you know, some way of scoring it in a way that makes sense to the general public at large? Obviously that works differently in different areas. We found out when we went through it previously. So we have to be conscious of that in terms of what that actually looks like, but we can ask and see what people come back to.
Just to pick up a comment on that,
Good,
I don't think teachers or head teachers are necessarily care what the rules are. They just want to know what the rules are. I think last time they was totally in the blank as to why 6 schools magically appeared. And that's what we need to avoid. If you're going to bring people with us, they got to know why they're there. And so I don't think, I totally agree, you won't get a unanimous decision on that. Of course, some people prioritise things over others, but as long as they know what they're being scored on, they can understand at least if they don't agree.
Yeah, it's a really good point. The why is the thing that came out the most from those workshops. Why will we pick? Why would you pick that school? And I think that's the thing that we need to communicate much clearer.
We will. Councillor Gladwin.
Yes, I was just wondering what the impact of devolution would be on potential school closures.
I don't anticipate that devolution will have any impact on the needs of children on the island in terms of their education requirements.
Follow-up question?
Well, obviously, we will have more funding available, so that this could be something that prevents school closures, because my ward is central rural, and I have 2 rural schools that are potentially at risk, and I would be against those schools closing, as I would be against all island schools closing, any island schools closing. And another consideration that we haven't sort of thought about too much is the fact that obviously next year will be full elections, so the you know, the complexion of the council could be very different to how it is today. So I would be very adverse to making any decisions about closures or even thinking about closures. Thank you.
I think you make good points. This issue has been ignored, all due respect. It's been ignored by the previous administration for 4.5 years. If you went to your local schools regularly, or a governor at your local schools, and understood the school's budgets, or head teachers are under tremendous pressure to restructure all the time, to balance the books all the time. And the result of that is you can't just de-link that from the fact that our standards in our schools are rock bottom. You know, sitting second to bottom on a league table is very uncomfortable. And a lot of the school staff and teachers work incredibly hard, but without the balanced budgets to produce what the quality of education needs, it's a vicious circle. So if school closures are part of the recommendation of the process, you know, to address the problem, we can't, as a committee, avoid the problem. If there's elections next year, we could back this down the line to next year, you know, give it to someone else to sort out. We are elected and part of this committee to sort out, or we've inherited a huge, was a problem, became a serious problem because of the decision in March not to go ahead with school closures, not commenting whether right or wrong, is now critical. And you know, the schools that I speak to and the schools I work within, they've got critical, Councillor Henry would agree with this, critical balance budget issues, just like the council have. And since decisions have to be made, we can't, as a committee, ignore it until next year. I won't allow that because it's not what we're here for. We're here to represent and do the right thing for our communities.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. Just to comment on the finances of it. So with devolution, we don't yet have clarity about what the extra money will be. And when it does come, if it comes, that funding may come with certain terms and conditions. It might be ring fenced, so it can only be spent on certain things. So it might not even be within the council's gift to spend it on education, for example. If it were to go into the council's general fund, along with the other income that the council has from council tax, etc., it would be unusual for a council to spend general fund income on education, because education is funded out of a different ring fence grant called the Dedicated Schools Grant. It would be theoretically possible for whoever is in administration in the future to decide to supplement education income, which it receives from the Dedicated Schools Grant, with general fund income. But what that would mean is that there was less in the general fund to spend on other things that the general fund would normally be spent on, like children's social care, adult social care, and all the other costs that the council has. But that would be up to the council in the future, the administration, to decide how they wanted to spend that. But there's nothing that I'm aware of within devolution which is going to affect the Dedicated Schools Grant and how that is allocated.
The thing is, at the moment, we just don't know. And last night, Councillor Blake and myself were informed that we would have some sort of input into the devolution system. So, I mean, I don't know how that will look like at the moment, but I would like to think that it would be good if we could sort of use our influence to get more money for the schools to, you know, sort of make the under 13.8 to support small schools to remain affordable. So I think that's something that we could certainly press for in the future, to get more money for our rural and small schools.
When I got home last night, I read the update on the national school funding formula. The government have just produced a paper. No changes to 2026, 2027 funding. It's worth looking at the DfE website and reading it, because basically, you know, all the schools grants are totally ring fenced, and schools are paid £4,884 it is per pupil. And that's where the problem lies in some schools. If you're 10 pupils short in your reception year, the best part of £49,000 short of funding. And that, you know, whilst councils can top up education funding, adult social care will top up the funding from other sources. And this council budget and all councils' budget across the country are really tight. So unless the government suddenly decides to give education system in all counties more money, that's where the problem lies in the school funding system. And you only get paid per pupil, and that's why the lack of pupils is causing us issues we're currently in. Anything you want to add to that? Was that a simplistic explanation? Yeah. It might be worth talking to your local schools about their budgets. Go and see the school business manager, get their view on, how they allocate their funding within the school. Are they restructuring? Have they restructured? Are they, planning to restructure? And that restructuring, of course, doesn't help education standards, in my opinion. But talk to your local school business managers, get their view. Councillor Hendry's next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. My question is regarding timelines. So if we agree this tonight, we're going to go out and get some more information. And Councillor Braden said probably March time we'll get a report back to this committee. Theoretically, will that report suggest that on the whole people think maybe we should close schools? Will that potentially name schools, or will that be a separate process afterwards? Because I know we keep saying we have an emergency, but for me, it looks like it's going to be some time before we actually take any action still. And I know that may be good from the process we learned last time, but some schools may not be able to survive with their budgets, and any deficit they have may come to the council. So it seems like we're saying it's an emergency, but we're slowing down.
Thank you, councillor. So the suggestions that we're asking you to, the recommendations we're asking you to consider tonight are not around naming a school. They're around the principles that we want our education system to look like, to consult on the place planning areas, and to review the school place planning strategy. So what we would do is come back to you after we've done those, if you mandate us to do that, come back to you with suggestions on the school place planning strategy, the outcome of the consultation on the school place planning areas, and then what we want the education system to look like. So then we can go out to consult on what you decide after that.
Okay, so realistically, we're saying for the academic year 26-27, we aren't going to have any schools that we will be closing from this council. If any schools are closing it because they voluntarily had decided to do so by themselves, or they've gone bust, would be my take from that.
It depends what you mandate us to do tonight, and obviously schools don't go bust. We license their deficits, so we have to sign off the deficits and work with that school around that. When a school gets into a financial difficulty, we've got a number of options available to us, and we can invoke something called our statutory powers. We don't tend to do that, but we can. That means that we can take over the school's budget. We can add more governors to the school's governing body. We can remove the governing body. They are big flags. They're big. It's not, a great thing to do, but we can do them should we need to. Local authorities don't like doing that because it's not good for community relations. But should the school not be able to manage its budget, we have got tools available at our disposal.
Hey, from my perspective, from the chair, we have to do this right. We have to take the time it takes to do it right, because a lot of the comments last time where it was rushed, and we as Councillor Lee said, it's learning from lessons. But we've got to get this right over the correct period of time, and we'll move as quickly as we can with the public and the diocese and the head teachers all on board, because it's got to be done together. How quickly that takes to get there, will be dependent upon what we wish to do as a committee, really. But yes, we need to move this forward in a timely manner and an open and transparent way, which we will do. So, Councillor Christian's next, I believe.
I want to make a proposal.
You're on the list.
I'll make a proposal.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's not right to say that's been ignored, because the process over the last few years with the administration, I didn't have any part in the last decisions, and you already started to try and make it political by starting naming parties and things like that.
Apologies,
and we're trying not to do that, and it hasn't been ignored, because I think there's been closures all the time. There's lots of closures with past administrations, and our residents have put up with that, and they always find it really difficult. And we have got to be really sensitive to this, because I've got 2 villages near me that have lost schools over the years, and those villages don't have any children left in them now, and that's really hard for different generations. So we know what the effects are when we close these schools. So it's putting all that into place, and I think it's really, ungenerous to say that we haven't, because it's just a continuation of that. And we've had COVID in between and lots of other reasons. So, and I do feel it was rushed last time, and we've got to do it the right way. So I don't think there's any point in rushing it to get it done by a certain year. If it takes longer and we've got bigger debts, I think it's got to be done the right way, because people do need to know the criteria. And we owe the people of our community that. So I would just like to see that. I know you've put lots of options there, Naomi, and I think we're going to need lots of different elements of that. I mean, I'm guessing that is possible to have, and I think we have put the PAN numbers have already gone down considerably in areas, and so I think it's going to be, whether it's amalgamations, closures, PAN numbers, it's going to need to be all of that if we're going to look at it in a bigger picture. I think the areas are key to it as well, but we've got some very rural schools, small schools that are doing very well on very little money, and they're probably doing better than some of the bigger schools that are doing. So we've seen that in those results. So I think we need to take that into consideration as well. That's all. That we've got some in my area that are doing incredible results with very little things, and I think that's not to necessarily be changed, because that works for that area. So I think there's lots of items to put into that. Thank you.
Yeah, all good points. apologies to me if I said anything I shouldn't have said, apologies. And I think you're right, in the combination of solutions may be or combination of options may well be what comes out of the consultations. You're absolutely spot on, thank you. That's Andre.
Thank you, Chair. And what I'm going to say actually follows on very nicely from that. So quite near the beginning of this debate, Naomi said, quite rightly, no one wants to close schools. We don't. No one wants to close schools. But as you said, Chair, at the beginning of the meeting, not closing schools, even though it has to be an option on the paper, in reality is not an option because it would be to the detriment of our children. And that's why we're all here. I would, however, I think the paper is very clear. I think the information provided is really good. But let's not lose sight, this is to go to a consultation. I would urge all committee members, though, the options that have been put before us are all the possible tools that we have that we can use. But for each option, there are strengths, but there are also areas of concern. So just because an option is listed on the paper doesn't necessarily mean it is a good option or even a potential. It's just these are all the options that are available to us. So I would urge all the committee members to actually look at the strengths, but also the areas of concern, because I think that will also help to add clarity. And it may well be that several options are open to us, but we know at the end of the day, inevitably it will be school closures. There will be people campaigning. It was very painful for me to actually read children saying, please don't close our school. Nobody wants to do this, but I think this paper will give us the means to go out to consultation, to get get everybody on board, take everybody with us to actually find a way through this, which we absolutely must. Thank you.
Totally agree. I think this is around, building consensus. We must also remember, though, that schools have life cycles. People come through the school too, so parents will be affected if it's their school in particular. We know that when we started the engagement sessions back in the Easter, they were attended, but not as well attended as potentially they could have been. We had governors sessions through our governor forums. They could have been better attended too. It's always good to look back and say that I think what we've learned through this is making sure that we communicate clearly and widely and with lots of different stakeholders through this around all of the different possibilities that we can come back to yourselves as decision makers to make those decisions on.
You have a follow-up question, guys? Well, are you happy? Yeah, Councillor Lilly. Councillor Fuller, do you wish to talk before Councillor Lilly does?
I would like to say something. As you're probably aware, the one school that did close was a school in my ward. For me, as a local member, it was very difficult, and it was heartbreaking to go out to my community. And at the end of the day, it was very difficult as a local member to say to residents, parents, staff, the school is in debt, the school is in deficit, the school has been in deficit for several years. There's going to be more schools that are going to be in deficit. I think it was, for me, quite a difficult journey to take. The one school that I have left in my ward is now the largest primary school on the island. And, some of the issues that are coming back from that are quite, at the moment, they need to be, there are things that need to be resolved. So to sort of like say that last administration didn't make difficult decisions. They did. And I know that there were members of the cabinet that were having sleepless nights. It was not an easy decision that we as cabinet had to make. I think also I would like to pay testament to some of the officers as well, because it wasn't just members that were getting criticised, it was officers as well. And I think it is very, very traumatic to go through that journey. That said, keep the schools not dealing with this is not an option. It is absolutely critical. We have to look at the island. And I think one of the other issues that we're also going to be looking into is the secondary sector as well. With secondary schools as well, can the island still sustain the number of secondary schools that we've got? We don't know. This is something else we need to look into. And again, I think that is an important facet of what we're doing. But yes, to say that it was rushed, I don't think it was rushed. I think the amount of work that went on, particularly from officers and from members, was absolutely considerable. We spent a lot of time on this. And I know I didn't vote as a member of the cabinet. I just couldn't. When you have parents on the phone to you crying, saying, well, this school is absolutely fantastic, it's a great school. How can you be impartial when you look at the island as a whole? And that was the position that I was in. It was one of the most difficult decisions I had to make, but I'm glad I did. And I know that in Cowes now that there is some certainty because we've lost one of our schools. That has helped. And I know, Councillor Brady, you've also mentioned in the West White. I know that there is a little bit of certainty in the West White as well. But again, we have falling numbers. Our numbers are falling by, I think it was a quarter in the space of 5 years. We cannot sustain that, and we're very lucky that the government doesn't call in the debts that we are having to find to support those schools. So I think there is a huge amount of work that needs to be done. There's a lot of stopgaps, and again, I think we need to also make sure that we take people with us. We took people with us last time, but as soon as you name schools for closing, the people that you had and you thought were on side, they change your mind because they think about their schools and they think about their area, and that is an issue. I think if you are a school threatened with closure, you're going to know it from the get-go, and there are some schools on the island that I think will be concerned, but I think it's important that they get engaged in the consultation and we start working with them as soon as we can, because we just cannot carry on with the amount of schools that we've got. Thank you.
As a Fuller, I think, thank you for those words. I think it's heartfelt because obviously it did affect you. I apologise for my choice of words earlier because we've been through this in the West White. I didn't live in the West White. I had songs sung about me and all sorts of placards about me everywhere in the West White, but I don't live in the West White. For you, you live in the ward, and you live near the school. I can only imagine how it was, well, for you at the time. So your words are, and I think what you said. We will do this if it has to be done. We will do this together the right way, right timings. We'll work together with the communities, the schools, everyone. And that's what we discussed about. This is why we've gone back to the real basics with an options paper. There could be a combination of options come out as a recommendation. It could be a combination of the options. But if we do it, we'll do it right together, engaging with everyone. So thank you for your comments. Is anyone else wish to speak before I bring Councillor Lilly in? Okay, Councillor Lilly.
Well, thank you, Chair. I wish that feel we've got to move on. So we've actually got to make a decision tonight, and I think the three options A, B, and C enable us to get the information to be able to make a clear decision, right? In the process. And I think what this has done, and the workshops has done, already doing, and there'll be further workshops and further consultation, is listening to people and actually getting more of the, the stakeholders involved. So I think it's what we don't want to do is not, do D, which you're absolutely right, Chair, is not the way forward. Before I make the proposal, I just want to make one thing that came up in the ones is we do need to look at our staff and actually make sure that they don't have the experience that some of them had through this process, which was actually not very nice, right? And I think there were some suggestions of possibly internal, having external people or independent people to actually help. When you're actually putting this consultation, can you also look, when you look at how to, that we actually make sure that we don't have or we can't stop it, but we minimize the real trauma that was actually created by the process. And particularly, I know your team went through some difficult experiences. And if we need to, so some suggestions of how can we learn from that and how can we actually implement, because that would, when we have to implement, in a way that cares for all the players, all the stakeholders involved. And I say that as a mental health champion of that, because some people were deeply scarred by the process. And I think we need to be sensitive of that. So it's not just about doing something, it's how we implement it in a way. I will go on to now proposing the three, A to C. I'm sure I don't have to read them out. And I look for a seconder.
Rondé will second that. Councillor Lee, thank you for your wise words. I think it's a very balanced opinion you've just given, and I'm grateful for that. So proposed by Councillor Lilly, recommendations as per the paper, second by Councillor Andre. All those in favour, please. Okay. Anyone against? Any abstentions? We have one abstention. So thank you again to officers for the work put into this. Do you now have sufficient guidance to go to the consultation stage? Perhaps when the consultation is ready, share the consultation with members, just see what the consultation paper actually reads like. I'm sure we'd appreciate that. And we'll go from there. An aim time frame for the March meeting to bring it back, yeah? Thank you. Thanks, members, for your balanced views given out this evening on what is going to be a tricky issue, but and I know a lot of the comments were heartfelt, and I'm glad Councillor Fuller, we got it finished by 2 minutes to spare before you have to depart. So thank you, Councillor Fuller, and thanks for your comments this evening. It's much appreciated. You're going to depart now, Paul, yeah? Okay. Right, we'll move on. I'm just going to, we'll go to number 8, actually, something that slipped on the agenda, but it's nevertheless extremely important, which is a whole raft of training that we all have to do. Sarah, welcome. Pave, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry it snuck on. In May, the full council agreed the constitution, and in the constitution it sets out that councillors will be provided and are required to satisfactorily complete a suitable induction programme and then ongoing training and briefings. So this paper is around trying to specify that learning and development. Apologies to councillors who sit on more than one committee who've heard this all before. Specify the learning and development requirements, agree those with you, and then to look at ongoing learning and development that you might need or require to in order to facilitate your decision making. This is only formal learning, so be aware that anything you read and anything you engage with and visits you make are all learning as well, but this is about the formal learning that you might wish to have added to this. So the paper is around saying, are you happy to agree the essential learning plus any other additions you might want to identify? Other committees have suggested additional learning that they might want to do, and that would be an ongoing process as the committee develops. This paper is going to all 5 committees. Vote was agreed at full council to be supportive of you doing ongoing training and briefings. There's a specialisms in each committee, so I felt it was important to come and seek your agreement to it. So this paper has already gone through policy, finance and resources and adult social care and housing needs, and you are the 3rd committee, and then you follow.
Thank you. So I'll ask a question, but I found the first 7 training modules, and I just found it on the on the intranet. I couldn't find the understanding local government procurement. Is that attending one of the briefings? Because I couldn't find a course on that.
Yes, it is attended. There was a briefing last week.
Yeah.
And if you couldn't attend that, those slides will be put up, and then we'll be able to record reading of those slides as well.
So number 8, that counts as attending a briefing or reading the slides. So how do we mark that as, and how do we, the other 7 are all online courses. So when do you want them done by?
Well, dare I say that those online courses have been available since the beginning of the administration. So it's a case of a bit of catch up in those. But then the specialist learning that you might want to identify for this committee, then that would be down to you, I think, to decide what you want to do and when you want to do it by. Very happy for that.
So bear in mind that most councillors on this committee didn't know about these courses until last Tuesday. Me, for certain, I didn't know about it until last. I missed it in the constitution. So as we only found out about it last Tuesday, anyone was clever enough to pick it up beforehand. I believe we should have this done by a certain time, shouldn't we?
Well, I'd like to report every quarter on what learning and development councillors have done, and I'd really like to engage with you on how you record your learning and how you might want to add other things that you do outside of this, so that that report is rich with data and not just a tick sheet of essential modules you might have completed.
Councillors, Councillor Hendry.
Okay, 2 questions. What happens if we don't do the training? And will the results of doing the training be published? Well, that's the number 1 way to get us to do it.
What happens if you don't do the training? What happens to all council staff if they can't do the training? It's about having a will to do it, I think, more than a punishment if you don't. There isn't a punishment if you don't, but I think what you're signing up to is saying we want to be well informed about things, and there is then a positive will to be well informed. So yeah, there isn't anything I can do if you don't do it.
Can I suggest that we publish the training records that people do? That's probably the best way.
I 100% agree.
Absolutely, very happy to.
This will be a standing item on every committee meeting now going forward, won't it? Is that right?
Yes.
So an update on who's doing what.
Yeah, I think well, I was thinking that it would be quarterly, but then obviously we're going to run out of time. But because you need some time, as you've rightly pointed out, to get some under your belt. So, but very happy to do it at every committee, or to at least have an agenda item where you raise emerging learning needs. Thank you. As an agenda item.
Well, I just think we should be trusted to do it, and I mean, once we've done it, we've done it. So I don't really see the need to do it quarterly, and I just think we're all grown up, so we should be just trusted to do it. So that's my view on it.
So it's not about just doing those 8 modules; it's about continuous learning and development.
But even then, I just think we should be just trusted to do it, so I will be doing it. So, yeah.
On the planning committee, it is in the reports who has done what. So I don't think it's been done before, so we could easily do it for every committee to show what councillors have actually done. That would be useful.
Yeah, you're right. It's on the regulatory committees and it's the service committees that we hadn't got it in place for. So that's why it's coming to you for agreement.
That's Andre.
Thank you, Chair. I was really pleased, having had some excellent training through the Local Government Association, to see that we're aligning our strategy and planning to the principles of the Local Government Association Member Development Charter. There is, however, I think, a little bit of anomaly in here, because I'm quite happy to be corrected on this, but I think twice now, coming up for 3 times, I have completed the online form for some external training for transport costs. And it says very clearly on that form that in order for the form to be accepted, the councillor has to submit a 300-word report. But to date, I have submitted 2 300-word reports, which have actually, dare I say this, been received with some surprise. And I think I am the only person that has submitted these reports. I think it's a good thing, don't get me wrong. But in this paper, it says shall be encouraged to. Well, it's quite an encouragement if you're actually claiming some travel expenses that are dependent on you producing the report. And so I think I would like to see, rather than encouraged, that if you are attending external training, because it is clearly on the form, that you should have to submit a report. And it's useful because that report then goes on to the system, doesn't it? So that it can be viewed. So it's a sharing of that learning, which I think is also an important aspect. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to, one of the benefits on the planning committee training is you actually are doing it with others, and there's a discussion of the process in context with the planning. What concerns me when you do things online, you're not having that dialogue with officers to put your learning into context. So when you've got, for instance, about prevent, it's actually, I think, useful to say, well, what is the issue within prevent on the Isle of Wight, and put that into the context. So for me personally, I think that the online might actually help people sort of get up to date, but we do need to build in some kind of group work of us coming together, you know, similar to the model of the planning, because then you can actually say, well, this is actually happening in my ward. How does that, you know, contact? And I definitely learn from that. You know, the old thing, tell me and I might, you know, I'll forget. Show me, I might, you know, understand. Sort of, I can't remember the second. The third one is involve me and I'll understand. And I think there needs to be that bit of involvement, and it definitely works. We got a model there on the planning, right, to do that. So there needs, I think, you know, how does safeguarding link into with the safeguarding issues that we're faced on a daily basis in this issue? And that would be far more helpful, I think, to committee members. Huh? That's my point.
Can I answer, Chair? I absolutely agree, and these are just a bare minimum. Those mandatory e-learning modules are a bare minimum, the same as all staff in the council have access to that. So this is really just to bring you up to a point where you then say, actually, what we'd like to do is more in-depth safeguarding or whatever, and then you get that interaction and the learning. This learning is just a bare minimum, really.
Thank you.
Are there any further councillors wish to comment? Councillor Blake.
Only just to say that it is well needed, particularly in the situation where we're in a committee system now, that we need this at least basic information. And I think just as an idea, because we obviously have on our profiles a attendance rate given. It may be a good place to sort of put a little sort of link to our service things there, just so if people are looking up. Not that I think anyone's ever looked up my service rate, my attendance rate, sorry, but yeah, if they do it, I'll find 100%. It's only one, by the way. But they might want to find there where what we've learned and how good we are as a councillor in terms of done the training, etc.
I refer to paragraph 5. Paragraph 5 of the report quotes the Constitution section. We all voted for the Constitution to change the committee structure. Section 5 quotes a section from the Constitution. Councillors will be provided and required to satisfactorily complete a suitable induction programme and ongoing training briefings. We perhaps should have known that from May. We shouldn't need to be reminded in the paper that it's just appeared this week, but we should have known that. I didn't. So I think it says in the Constitution we should complete induction training. So I think we absolutely should do, and we should have those results shared amongst us. We're going forward making a decision. Sorry, Ashley, do you want to comment? Yeah, please do. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the point about training, I wanted to highlight the link to the Local Government Association page that's in the report. And if you've been on there, there's an absolute wealth of training on there that I would draw to your attention. I mean, for example, matters around children's services in general, corporate parenting, equality, diversity and inclusion, and other things that are relating, supporting mentally healthier communities, for example, supporting your constituents with complex needs, the importance of speech, language and communication in the early years. I could go on. So, and I think what it will allow you as councillors to do is to make more informed decisions when you're voting on things that are really having huge impacts on children's lives and families' lives. It's really important, obviously, that you understand the importance of these things. So I'd urge you, whether it's recorded or not, to find the time, please, to do that. In terms of the workshops, so we do have a workshop scheduled for the committee in a couple of weeks. I know that not everyone can make it, it's during the day, but I really welcome Sarah's involvement in those on an ongoing basis, because certainly the intention is that we'll carry on doing this to make sure that all of you are able to discuss, ask questions and develop your learning in a more bespoke way as well. We'd certainly do that. And I guess it's also worth thinking about the fact that as elected councillors, you do actually have certain duties regarding, for example, corporate parents. You are all corporate parents, and it's really important that you understand, not just because you're on this committee, but because you're a councillor for the council, what those duties around corporate parenting relate to and how you can fulfil your duties around that as fully as possible. So that's just one example where there's a specific training module on the Local Government Association website. And just finally, if that wasn't enough, do be aware that when we get inspected by Ofsted and the Care Quality Commission, they will be wanting to understand where children's services sit as a priority within the wider council agenda. They will expect that councillors understand their duties related to children and families. They will expect councillors to be actively involved. They will expect councillors to have taken the steps that they need to develop their understanding of statutory duties and the role of council in children's lives, wherever your current level of understanding is. So there will be people interviewed by inspectors, whether it be a children's social care inspection or an inspection of special educational needs and disabilities by Ofsted and the Care Quality Commission, or whether we're having an inspection under the joint targeted assessment inspection as well, or indeed relating to the Youth Justice Service. These all relate to duties that councillors have, and so I just want to flag the importance of making sure that people invest in an ongoing basis on their own development.
Thank you. Sarah, oh sorry, Councillor Andre, sorry.
Sorry, I just feel it is on my register of interests, but I should just declare at this point that I am a member of the Local Government Association Children and Young People's Committee.
Thank you for that, and thanks for doing that as well. The recommendation is that the committee approves the content of the report and begins to undertake the learning and development required of them. Any new learning to be added to the committee's requirements should be discussed and agreed by committee members. Before I propose it, I would also like to propose that as we are 4 months behind the curve on this one, we should have started this ages ago. I would like to propose that all these training modules are done by our January meeting. And I think we should have a report at the January meeting on how we're doing against those, because if it's in the Constitution, we need to be guided by the Constitution. And I think as she has said, if we get inspected, we haven't done any of this training, it's a bit of a red mark. So are members happy that we set a goal? I like targets. We set a goal of by our January meeting, we get these modules. They're all online modules. I don't know how long they take. I haven't clicked into one yet, but I found them. More by luck than judgment. I have to say, perhaps a guidance on how we get into the modules. I found it by mistake when I was picking through to find it a couple of years somewhere. I clicked on My Learning I was signed into it somehow.
Yes.
Some people might not be signed into My Learning. That's an idiot guide. How we get into it would be useful. But could we actually, do we change the recommendation or just put it in the minutes? How do we play this? Yeah. If we minutes, I want it done by January, or we will commit to it by then. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely.
And you can put off a report for our January meeting.
Yeah. And
Showing.
if anyone has any issues with getting into the hub, just let me know.
Okay. So
Chair, sorry, can I just ask that it is put in there, if possible, that a 300-word report must be submitted for any external training, because
Yes,
it is on the digital form.
It is on the digital form, and there is a space in the Learning Hub for you to add your own learning, so that can be populated there. So anything you do outside of anything we might offer or whatever, you can upload yourself, you can upload evidence. So have a look at the Learning Hub, have a play, and if there's any issues with it, please just contact me straight away and we'll sort it out.
So
just a quick point, obviously, Chair, that that can be, if you are minuting that, circulated to people that aren't here, just because it would be a bit unfair to go. I'm sure that they're going to watch this meeting back in their absence, but they might.
I propose a recommendation with a caveat that Sarah will send an idiot guide round for people who don't know how to access My Learning. Because I wasn't sure I was going in the right direction to find it. All the modules are on my system. So they're there. And second caveat is that we actually get these finished by our January meeting, whatever the January meeting is. Yeah, so that's my proposal. Councillor Hendry seconds that. All those in favour of committing to do that? Thank you, everyone. I don't think they'll be that long to complete, are they? Online modules aren't normally that long, are they? So we've basically got 3.5 hours work and some slides to read by January. Thank you, everyone. Sarah, thank you for the paper. So, yeah, thank you. We'll move on to item 6, which is the last one, which is our performance update. Page 19 to pages 20. So over to whoever's going to present first on the performance paper. Ashley.
Thank you, Chair. This paper is essentially a standing item. There's a huge amount happening within children's services, lots of change, lots of work around improving outcomes for children. And so it's an overarching report, happy to dive into any particular areas, but I would like to just make a few points before we open it up. So the first thing I'd like to highlight to the committee is, and you may know this from talking to the communities that you serve, that the needs amongst children and families remains high. So if we look at it in terms of the numbers of children who require an education and healthcare plan for their needs to be met, we continue to see high levels of requests for needs assessments. If we think about the numbers of children who require a child protection plan for them to be safe, the numbers remain high. And this reflects the needs of the families that are within your own communities. So you're probably aware of that already. The second thing I want to say is I want to say a big thank you to a number of people. The first thing is the colleagues who are with me here this evening. I am hugely fortunate and privileged to work with colleagues within children's services. Some of them are here tonight, some of them are not, some of them are online earlier. They're logging in. Some of them have been at work since 7:30 this morning. Here we are. It's almost 7 o'clock in the evening, and they're going at it with huge commitment and passion to improved outcomes for children and families. And it's a huge privilege to be part of that team. So thank you to everyone who's here this evening, but also everyone who works within children's services every day. But importantly also, it's not just people within the directorate. There are very few things that children's services can do on our own. We rely on our colleagues in DEM services, in legal, in people and organisational development, and all the other raft, IT, all the other people who work across the council. We can't do anything on our own. And I also want to say thank you to people who are in what we call our One Island team. So we've talked about the NHS this evening, we've talked about the voluntary sector. We had lots of colleagues from the education sector online, governors, we had head teachers, we had representation from the diocese. And we work together as one team, and we have a huge, I think, commitment from a range of different organisations and people to drive improvement for children and families. And I want to say thank you to everyone who's involved in that. And the third thing is around, you'll have seen in the report, we have to focus on early identification and prevention. The reason that we have so many children at the statutory end of the system, the reason that we have the highest rate of educational healthcare plans as a percentage of total child cohort, the reason we have so many children requiring a child protection plan for them to be safe, the reason we have so many children in care still, although the number has come down over the past 18 months from about 285 to about 260, is because we are not identifying need early enough, and we are not putting support in place early enough. And if we can do more of that, we will prevent need from escalating, and that will be better for children and families. We'll have less children in the statutory end of the system, and overall that will also be better for the public purse. So this focus on early identification is really important. And again, it's an example of something we cannot do this on our own. We need to work with our voluntary sector colleagues, with our NHS colleagues, with our schools, and everyone else who plays a part on the island to do this. Three things I've picked, examples of things that are going really well. I wanted to pick an example of a piece of work that's happening within education and inclusion and access. It's an initiative called School Attendance is Everyone's Business, and it highlights the importance of attending school and being in school on children's outcomes, and the fact that everyone can play a part in this. It's not just the school, it's also about our officers who work within education, inclusion and access. It's about colleagues who work in special educational needs. It's about our colleagues in children's social care. Everyone can play a part in improving school attendance. And if we improve school attendance, we know that will be better for children. I want to highlight the work that's going on around corporate parenting within children's social care. There's a huge amount. There's an item on this coming to the November committee. I think you'll be really excited by what you see when that paper comes to you. And we've made a lot of progress with that. And that is one of the most important things that we do as a council, is to care for the children who are our responsibility, where we have parenting duties for them. And we're making lots of progress in that. But where we haven't made progress yet, what the report will outline about where we're going over the next 12 months and longer term. And that's a really great piece of work that's been going on. And the third thing I want to highlight is just around people. I've said in the past that I believe that the single biggest determinant of success in children's services is the quality of the people. And we have great people within the council. We have great people across the island. And not only that, we're seeing loads of examples of where people are developing very, very quickly. They're taking on new responsibility. They're adapting their skills into new environments. We have to do that because the world is changing. The needs of children are changing, and we're seeing a great adaptability from staff as well. And we're also very fortunate to have people like Steph, who's come to join the team in the same way that there are other colleagues from the education system, for example, who have joined the council team to help us implement our strategies, including the education strategy, which is going to be a piece of work through to 2030. So I think performance of people has been something which has been really impressive. Three worries I want to highlight to you that you need to be aware of with your responsibilities around children and families. The first thing is, I can't see the needs of children and families changing, improving anytime soon. Yes, we need to focus on early identification and earlier support, but that's going to take time to feed through. But if you think about the factors that are driving this need, things like the cost of living, things like people's unstable housing situations, things like the impact that that has on adult mental health, on substance misuse, on domestic abuse, things like this, which are actually the things that drive children into children's services. You know, I don't see things necessarily changing that quickly with regard to that. So that's a really important thing to remember. And if you think about things like children's mental health and the things that are driving that, and what's happening in the online world, there's some very significant things that we're seeing in terms of children's mental health, but also children's behaviours, which I think is very closely linked to what they're getting up to online, where people aren't looking, the things they're watching, things they're getting involved in. And these are things that we need to address with our school colleagues and the police and other colleagues who are part of our One Island team. The second area of concern that I have is around homes for children, and not just the availability of homes for children we care for, whether they be foster families or residential care, but also those specialist education placements we need. And there'll also be a paper coming forward in November, which I think we're going to try and add onto the forward plan, around further expansion of specialist education places for children on the island, which is something we know we need. We've made good strides. There was a paper that came forward in the summer about expanding, but we need to do more. So there'll be a paper coming on later in the autumn. I'm on that. And the last thing is just around the financial challenges that we face. If you look within children's services, you'll have seen in the paper our major overspends against budget are around home to school transport. They are around agency social workers, which is driven, the need for that is driven by the needs of our children and families. And the third area of overspend is around the cost of homes for children, which is driven by a shortage of homes, and B, the complexity of children's needs. So when you get more complex needs for children we have to care for, the cost of meeting those needs go up. And we also have, those are all pressures in the general fund, but we also have pressures within the dedicated schools grant, specifically within the high needs block, which relates to special educational needs and disabilities. The numbers in there are significant, and we are working hard to minimise spend. Longer term, the best thing we can do is to do more early identification and intervention that will reduce the escalation of need, and it will be better for the public purse as well. So happy to open it up to any questions.
Thank you for that very detailed update. Questions? So Lily.
I mean, thank you for that. One particular area that I've always been very passionate about is stopping the tap, right? I.e. the flow of coming into the system. So totally behind the early identification within that. And I wanted to raise a question really about adult education. And I know Sarah is here and is on the, I think both I and Debbie are on the community learning group board. And I went to a recent meeting of that. From my experience, I mean, you've stated that one of the biggest reasons why children come into our care is poor mental health. And for me, experience, and I worked for this for nearly 30, 40 years, was having effective adult education alongside the children's education, particularly building self-esteem and confidence of parents, particularly parents going through a difficult time, like single parents coming through domestic violence. And if you bring them up and their aspirations, we know there's data that then their children do, and also less children come into the system. And that's one area that why I supported devolution, a big area was there's a big opportunity for funding coming down on adult education. And we do need to really build on that, and we need to work with the voluntary sector of that, because it's bodies like Bernardo's, and you know, they're actually working on the ground, and we do need to really give support, because our little adult education unit at Westridge does some great work, and we need to be looking at making sure, and I would like, you know, how we get and work in the future, possibly through devolution, to get more money into adult education, because compared to Portsmouth, you can see a wad of empowerment type courses and program. We do not have this on the island, and I think there is a relation between, definitely poor mental health. That was my profession for 40 years. We need to be focusing on getting those vulnerable parents who are going through a time, so they are able to cope, you know, at the early stages, and not drift into and their children drift into the system. So how do we get empower into adult education onto the island, because it's a huge deficit at the moment?
I think there was a question somewhere in there.
So Councillor Lee, thank you for raising the matter of adult education. In fact, we've had discussions, and this committee is, of course, the Children's Services Education and Skills Committee. And so it was being discussed about bringing actually a paper about adult education to the November meeting to provide an update, because there are a lot of linkages. I wonder also whether Kay might want to just comment on the children's social care reforms which are going on, and about the linkage there to working with families at an early intervention stage to prevent children coming into the statutory age, because there's a huge amount, this is part of the huge amount of work that's mentioned in the report about it, that Kay's working with our colleagues on the island about. Just might be helpful to Kay comment on that.
I'm not sure if you're aware of the social work reforms. It's called the Family First programme. It came out of the Joshua McAllister report, which was a review that was undertaken about the children's social care system. So government made a recommendation about new regulations that we need to implement. So this is the year of implementation for local authorities about the new social work reforms, of which there are 3 key areas. The first, as Ashley's just indicated, is about early intervention and prevention. So that's looking at a families first approach, whereby in localities or in communities there are multidisciplinary teams, so that families can access those services locally. So it's, you know, for example, we have really excellent family hubs and children's centres in localities. So for ourselves, we have an opportunity to expand on those arrangements and look at some of those extended services from a multi-disciplinary perspective. Within those reforms, where it's looking at early intervention and prevention, there are different practice models that would align. So at the moment, being a new children's services, having just built infrastructure and focused on that for the last year, we're now looking at how we organise our services. So we're also looking at our practice model alongside those family first programmes. And the reason I mention this, whilst Ashley's just talked about early intervention and prevention, is one of the practice models that we're exploring with partners. So there is an island approach, is what's called the family safeguarding model. So that model aligns with the social work reforms, but also one of the key principles is that within those multidisciplinary teams in localities or communities, that we also respond to what you've just mentioned there, Councillor Lily, around adults' mental health, adult social care needs, domestic abuse in local authority for adults, and also mental ill health. So what that would look at, and again, if this is a model that we look to implement on the island, it needs investment in that area. However, if we were to invest in early intervention prevention, what we do know, it will have those longer term direct impact to prevent, for example, children becoming cared for, which is one of the key essences of the programme. So that's what we're looking at the moment, and we're shaping with our partners. Once we've got agreed commitment, we'll shape the service delivery plan. But the other two key areas of the Family First programme, one is developing multi-agency child protection teams. There are different models of how we can create those. At the moment, we're looking at the expansion of our multi-agency safeguarding hub. You'll know that we've got contextualised safeguarding in there. But again, there's an opportunity to have a single point of contact in the service. So, for example, potentially aligning with our adult social care, looking at even CAMS being within there. We're not there yet, but these are some of the ideas that we're certainly looking at. And there's one point that I've completely gone blank on. Kinship care, thank you. And the other really key element of the reforms is what we're calling family decision making. And there's two elements to that. So it's at the very first point of contact with our families that what we should be doing is when there's statutory intervention, or even earlier, that we should be working with them and their families, who are all of your best people, to come together to help support those children and those families who are in need, or where there's safeguarding concerns. Because actually what we know is families are the best networks to be able to support children. And also, in the case where children can't stay with their parents or guardians for any reason, those family networks enables us to look at assessing those extended family members as kinship carers, so those children can stay within their families' communities. So that's a very brief outline of what the key components of the Family First programme is, but at the moment we're looking at how we shape that. And it may be, Chair, that in the future you'd like us to bring a paper to you to be able to share about what they are and what are the options that we're looking at implementing on the island.
I think that would be very useful. Yeah, I think whether we put that in the plan or not, but it'd be very useful to have that. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. We'll put that on the plan in a minute as well. Who else? Questions? Oh, that's Christian. Of course you can.
It said in the recommendation for this that changes to the corporate plan that we were going to. What number are we on? We are on the right one, am I? Yeah. Number 6. Yeah. Everyone was looking at me a bit blank. I was like, oh, I got it wrong. That's to give Ashley the opportunity to change the corporate plan. I'm just wondering what intentions there might be to change on it.
So that was one, I think, which has been put into a number of different committee reports across different committees to give the ability for the chief executive and the directors to work with members to make any appropriate changes to the corporate plan without necessarily coming back to committee on the basis that, as per the wording in the report, it relates to the priorities that are stated in the report.
Checking we're not going to get any big surprises of massive changes in the corporate plan. No, they're not. Okay, thank you.
Interesting. I read that. Yeah, I can see how you read it that way. I read like 3.2 and 3.3 as one. You know, like if we agree the priorities, then we don't get to actually authority to put those priorities into the. But you can read it as two separate lines, can't you? Yeah, spot on. Yeah. Anyone else have any questions? Councillor Andre.
Thank you. It's not really a question, but in terms of the effectively a refresh of the corporate plan and the priorities, I think it's only right and timely with all the changes that have been happening within children's services that we do have a refresh. And one thing I'm absolutely delighted to see as one of the first principles is prioritising, placing the voices of children, young people, parents, carers at the core of everything we do, because that's something, certainly as an administration, that we have really fought hard to get the voice of children through everything that we do. And I think that's absolutely paramount. So yes, very much in support of this. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no more questions, move to the recommendation. I will read it out actually. The committee note 3.1, the operational finance performance of the Children's Services Directorate, and that the committee 3.2 agree the current Directorate priorities, and 3.3 delegate authority to the Director of Children's Services to draft the relevant section of the revised corporate plan. A proposer, please. Everyone, okay. Councillor Andre, Councillor Blake will second that. All those in favour? Everyone, and again, thank you for. I like the presentation. It's short, punchy. You know, and it's to the point, which is what we asked for at the very beginning. So thank you for that. We'll move on to the final item is our work plan, which is paper 9. Obviously, there's quite a few things to add on to there. We have ticked on. We've covered all the options for October. The training one added on, but that will be a standing item now. So, Ashley, I know you want to comment about adding things on to the November meeting. There are already a few things on there, but a few things you want to add on to it. I think we need to, but we'll control the timings of the meeting accordingly.
So in November, we would like to bring the SEND expansion paperback, because that will need support so that we can progress the practical considerations, logistics, etc. in terms of expansion. So that will need to come in November, please. And there'll be a decision around that. The adult learning, I think, for reasons we've already discussed, I think it would be really helpful for committee to receive some information about that. It links to so many things, not just actually the ones that Councillor Lilly was talking about, but also, for example, our young people who have special educational needs and disabilities, their ongoing education, pathways into vocational employment, etc. It's a really important area for them. So I think that would be good for you to have that. It wouldn't necessarily be as time critical as the SEND expansion one. That would be November then. The transport one we've said would need to come back in January, so that would need to be added to the January forward plan. And then we've said also that the following the agreement of the recommendations relating to school-based planning, that would need to come back in the March meeting, so that would need to be added to the March meeting. We could bring something about social care reform. So we did actually circulate some information as one of the appendices. I think it was to the first meeting of this committee. But I think there's a lot of progress being made with this at the moment, lots of work on it. So it would be appropriate to provide another update. So probably we need to look at the volume that is already on each date and bring it when there's realistically time to do it within the meeting time.
I was just going to suggest perhaps in the new year, because we'll be further ahead. So there'll be more to share actually about what the options are for us.
I think you're right, because if you look at the January, a lot of the items are probably shorter. God almighty, shorter than perhaps some of the ones in November. So I think if you're happy to that, members are happy, we'll have that back in January. Yeah, and also in January, I'd like a report on a nice little chart on how everyone's doing against there. We obviously may need to make sure that Councillor Love and Councillor Churchman, Councillor Fuller, was Councillor Fuller still here then, wasn't he? So yeah, Councillor Churchman and Councillor Love.
No. I'll follow up this meeting with an email with the link to the Learning Hub and offers of support to access it. So
thank you very much. We'll put that on the agenda for January as well. And if it gets too heavy, we'll have to have a separate meeting. But at the moment, I think we can just about manage those workloads as we are. Okay, so that's agreed by everyone. We'll add that on, and perhaps Kat can send us an updated when it's done.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Agenda.
Lovely. If there's nothing else, we'll close tonight's meeting at 7:24. Thank you to officers for all your hard work as always. Thank you for councillors for your contributions this evening. Council closed.